Here we go. Go tour yourself. The final installation of this three-part online series that we've been doing, part of Office Hours, which again, check it out if you haven't yet. Really great. They just did 3 or 4 workshops in the fall that were together with Rising Artists and UMAW that were really cool. So I'm honored to be a part of this, to dive deeper into doing this yourself. And again, this is super introductory level. This is like very much DIY. So sorry if I repeat myself or if I'm saying things that seem obvious or if you already know. There's all levels of experience in here, and I love that so much. So I hope that you can gain some knowledge from this. And again, if you need any clarifications or if you have any questions, just sound off in the chat, and either Nerea or Zach will be collecting them so that we can answer questions at the end. A little about myself really quick. In case you haven't been here for the past couple weeks, my name is Marina. I run an independent booking company out of Los Angeles called The Witching Hours, and it's been a really cool journey doing this by myself for the past 10 plus years. But of course, it's a lot of knowledge that nobody is distilling out there. It's a lot of gate kept knowledge for some reason, as if this is really like secretive stuff, how this all works. But it's really just like you can Google this, you can ask around, and it's really not information that is difficult to do, I guess. But it is formulas and ways of doing things, orders of doing things that work for people generally, and they're really easy to execute once you know them. So that's what I'm here to do. It's just stuff that I've kind of pieced together over the past 10 years of booking tours. I'm also a musician and I tour myself. So I know pretty in depth what it's like on both ends to get on the road and be on the road and what that means physically, mentally, financially. So we'll get all into that. And then also we're going to go into routing a tour live. So you'll get to see how I like to do it myself. I'll provide some templates for you so that you can fill it out yourself as well. And then, we'll go from there. And please, again, reach out with questions anytime. We are donation based. Myself, this is for just this series. We're going to be cutting those videos down so that they're easier to digest. We're going to be making physical resources. So thank you so much to everyone who's donated so far. We've raised quite a bit of money, which is great, and every cent counts. So if you have a few extra bucks, I'm just putting up the QR codes here for donations, and we appreciate anything that you can give. Not mandatory, just throwing it out there. Okay, number 1, yay! How to tour yourself. So the itch to tour, to get out of your city, tends to appear when you feel a little stuck, right? Like when you feel like you've reached a certain plateau maybe, or you haven't been able to reach the right audience. How do you address this? A lot of the times it's just getting out of your city, and sometimes that means playing the next town over, or sometimes that means flying across the country. And we'll see what works best for you and how you can apply that to your band. So again, we're going to go over routing, kind of things that go into deciding what route you should make for your tour. So that's the path that you'll be taking from city to city, which cities and why. And you'll go over, again, a little bit of pitch emails. We did this in the first week, but I know that a lot of people weren't there. So we're going to just briefly go over how to send emails and what that might look like, the back and forth for you, and then how to find venues and local support when it's not in your city. That can be a big question, especially if you've never played outside of your city or seen shows outside of your city. You're not connected physically to the scenes there. How can you tap in? And finally, with very little, we're just going to talk about collecting data and how important that is, and what budgeting might look like for a tour. Just some very basic tips. You might have seen some of that last week during the more financial workshop of how to pay yourself and get paid. So we'll just touch on that as well, in case you missed that. Touring. When do you tour? This is kind of what we were talking about at the very beginning. When do you feel like you need to get out of your city? These are kind of questions that you can ask yourself to gauge whether or not it's time to tour. Do you have fans asking you to come out to another city nearby? For example, a fan that says, I really want to come out to your LA show, but I live in San Diego and it's just a little too far. Maybe it's time to get down to San Diego so they can see you, or to Arizona for that person in Tucson who really wants you to come and will house you. And, there's people that will support you and get you anchored to a city. So think about those fans that are reaching out and asking because they matter big time. Are you releasing music 6 to 12 months in the future? We kind of went over this in the first workshop, but that's kind of the timeline that talent buyers, booking agents are working with in the future. So if you're trying to book something in the next month or two, that might be way harder than if you're looking 6 to 12 months in the future. So thinking about when you're releasing music can also be thinking about when you want to hit the road. And we'll go over why those things go hand in hand a lot. And that's kind of what booking agents and talent buyers look for, really. Can you sell enough tickets outside of your hometown to finance a tour? This is super important. It's a really honest question you got to ask for yourself. We went over this big time last week. You're not just an artist. These days, you have to wear many hats. And so far, you have to treat your hat like you are an artist and this hat like you are a small business owner. Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to do this not just for fun, you kind of do have to treat it like a business sometimes. And that's okay. It's not personal. So you need to be honest with yourself and say, business, how many tickets can I really sell in San Diego? Is that just one fan that wants me out there? Do they have 10 friends that really want me out there? Is there another way that I can gauge how many people would come out to that show? And we'll go over that as well. If you can't finance a tour and you want to invest money into getting out and doing what I'd like to call an establishing run, and we'll go over that too, then how can you raise money? And there's a lot of ways to do it, but typically bands are doing GoFundMe's or they're selling merch just for the tour, raising money. They do a campaign on social media. I'm not really going to go over that in detail because we kind of did some of that last week, how to raise money, make sure you get paid. So just think about that. If you can't pay for it up front, there's so many other ways to finance a tour that is not just, you don't have to be like filthy rich to hit the road, but it does cost money. So it's just something to think about. You really want to be ready. So you're collecting data, you're understanding where your community is based, and then you're also understanding what your band needs, right? Because every band has completely different needs. And we'll talk about how weekenders or three-show runs, kind of like on the weekdays, slower weekdays, are a really easy way to get out of the city with low risk. And also can cater to the needs of your band who might have work during the week or families. And so something that we'll discuss how to cater to your band and questions to ask yourself while you're routing your tour that will be really crucial to your experience, not just financially, but emotionally and physically. And oh, one more note down here. Touring around releasing music really, and I'm going to reiterate this a lot during this workshop, it keeps your streaming numbers and socials numbers up, which unfortunately, when you're out of town and a talent buyer at a venue has never seen you play, that's kind of all they have to go off of, right? So you want to boost those numbers by the time that you're trying to hit the road so that when people are looking at them, they're like, okay, this is decent. If you haven't put out music in 6 years, you might want to consider putting out a single or two or even an EP before you hit the road so that you can make a juicier package for those talent buyers, right? Routing. Okay. These are kind of the major things that go into deciding your routing. And routing, just to bring it back to the essential, is the travel path that your tour will take. So we're talking about getting from one city to the next, right? And which cities to play and what size rooms, how many cities in a row can we play? All these things we're going to talk about. Drive time, for example, is probably the primary condition for routing. So you're going to add an extra hour for every 45 hours of driving. Sometimes you'll need to add drive days. We're going to go in depth to each of these, right? Markets, also very important. Days of the week in which market and which markets serve you best. These are going to be in depth. We're going to talk about what a major market or a secondary market means and how you can use that to your best advantage. There's ways to strategize. Band needs. I mean, typically I would put this at the top, but there's ways to work around everything and it's not that big of a deal. There's so many things that people think are deal breakers for hitting the road. And truly, there's so many ways to work around and accommodate band's needs. So we'll go over that. Data is so important. Data. Everyone's going to want to see your data. You should just be keeping track of it yourself. Myself, I hate numbers. I feel like I want to throw up when I do math. But this is like so crucial for your statistics. It's crucial for how you get these gigs. and also keeps track of for yourself of how to strategize the best tour. So we're going to go over all of these in depth right now. Drive times, probably the most crucial just because it decides which cities you're going to hit primarily. So the things that you need to be looking at yourself mostly is you start with a list of major markets that you want to hit. You say, I know that I want to hit, and I'm just going to be speaking from the West Coast examples because I live in LA and I've done the up and down the West Coast tour, booked it myself, not booked it myself, probably 30 times now. So I've done it a lot, and that's kind of what we're going to be going through today. And those drive times are a bit longer than on the East Coast. So it might help gauge, whether you need a drive day or not, etc. We'll go into that. But certain things you need to keep into account. For every 4 to 5 hours of driving, you need to add an extra hour about for food, gas, bathroom breaks. Some bands might need less, some bands might need more. You will figure that out, but I would rather you err on the side of taking more time than not. How long can your band drive on a show day and play a good show? How exhausting being in a van actually is. I want to really stress that. A lot of people think, oh, you're just like sitting in a car, but you've been on road trips before. Besides, how long can you drive all day in a van, right? So just think about what's the maximum amount. My typical recommendation for the bands that I book through Anniversary and through the Witching Hours is 6 hours. I feel, and myself playing a show, if I have to drive more than 6 hours on a show day, I'm so exhausted by the time I get to the venue. There's usually not time to like rest, get my tea, put my makeup on and stuff that I like to do to feel ready for the show. So I like to keep it to 6 hours max drive days, but sometimes that's not possible, and that's okay. We'll go over that. Sometimes you need a drive day. So sometimes you need to get to a city with not much time, and you need to take a whole day to just drive all day long. And that is not a day off. It can be tempting to treat it like a day off, but it is really a full work day because you are sitting in the van all day. You're not maybe eating the best food. You're not getting much rest. So, or movement even help get the juices flowing. So think about drive days and how they are not days off, but sometimes you need to do them to get to the major markets. If you can't do that, well, you can't take a day off to drive, you can't take a day off to rest, consider adding a city. Sometimes they're in secondary or tertiary markets. And again, we'll go over this in the next slide. But sometimes they're in even smaller towns. Sometimes that means it's easier to get folks out because there's not a whole lot going on otherwise, especially touring bands. Sometimes it means it's impossible to get folks out because it's a really sleepy place. So there's definitely cities throughout the US that cater those needs. They're sleepier, but they have a music scene there. So think about those kinds of places as well. That takes a bit of research just based on what other bands have done usually, but we'll go over. Sorry, I know I say we'll go over this a lot, but I just say that to assure you to not freak out yet. Stamina, again, we're talking about band needs here, but how many shows can your band play in a row without a day off? That's also including drive days. Can your hands and arms handle 5, 6, 7 days of drumming in a row a week without a day off? Something to talk about with your band. How many days off does your band need a week? Maybe they have jobs they need to focus on 1 day a week. Maybe they physically don't want to be playing 7 days a week or driving nonstop. Things to determine. We're going to talk about markets. We're not talking about the supermarket. This is just a really corporate way to refer to a city or a town. And typically they're referring to the size of the city, the sellability of that city, like how prominent the music scene is in that city. Some cities really struggle with the music scene. Some cities have booming music scenes. So despite being a small city or a college town. So it does not necessarily mean better and then second best, right? It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with how many tickets could you sell in these cities because of the amount of people that are there, the amount of venues, the amount of bands to play with. It just is a bit easier in primary markets, in theory, to get folks out. There's things that you need to strategize with primary and secondary markets. And this is the kind of the thing that I really stress with people coming to play in LA, for example, for the first time. People come to play in LA and they say, great, LA is a huge city and there's so much music there and so many bands to play with. So I'm going to try to get like a Friday or a Saturday at a cool venue, which I understand completely why that makes sense. But typically the opposite happens from what I'm seeing, where Fridays and Saturdays, actually, there's so much going on in each city, especially these primary markets. There's so much happening that you're competing against these huge events and people's personal plans as well. These cities are full of working professionals. Friday or Saturday night, they're cutting loose. They're not going to go to a show. They're not going to, they're going to hang out with their friends. They're going to go get dinner. They're going to try to relax. So you're also going up against that, not just the other shows and other entertainment that's available in every weekend in major markets. So if you're coming through a major market for the first time, cities like, New York, Detroit, Chicago, Nashville, I'm talking about the big ones that if you're from not the US, you've probably heard of. Those are like the major markets. And if you're not from the US and you probably haven't heard of them, we're talking, like Phoenix, or maybe you have heard of Phoenix, but just think about like in the movies, those are the major markets. And Flagstaff, Arizona is maybe like a tertiary market where it's a really small town that has a booming music scene. So that's, again, there's a whole range and it has nothing to do with the quality of the show that you're going to get there. It just has to do with how you can strategize. Secondary markets, people sometimes do entire tours that are just secondary markets. They don't even want to fuck with the big markets, right? They don't even want to try to compete in Los Angeles, New York. They're going to go for Pittsburgh. They're going to go for San Diego. They're going to go for the college towns, Boston. They're going to see that the crowds there are very strong. They have access to DIY or all ages, so smaller rooms, better deals. I mean, again, every type of market has its benefits, and you can use that to your advantage on how you're routing your tour. But I really want to reiterate, unless it's a hometown show for one of your bandmates, like I'm from San Diego, so when I get my band from LA down to San Diego, it's a hometown show for me. My whole family comes out, my friends from there come out. So, that was an easy step out of LA for me. But unless it's like a hometown show for a bandmate, just treat it like you're going to be up against so much competition Fridays and Saturdays. Try going for a weekday and see how that goes. And being able to take Fridays and Saturdays off to enjoy a city and see the music scene there is also a great way to network. If you want take an extra day off in Portland, and go see shows and meet people and meet bands, and that's also extremely valuable investment. Band needs. This is really important, and this is one of the first things I like to talk about with the bands that I book because every band has completely different needs. I book bands from ages 21 to 45, 50. So everybody has jobs, families. Some people can drive for 10 hours if they're 21 years old and then play a show that night. So just things to think about. Every single band has different needs, and these are really honest conversations that you can have with your band. I don't think any band would feel offended being like, so what's your vibe with touring? Like, how long can you be out for? So I mentioned work or family. You can do weekenders. A lot of people that work that have like office jobs do weekenders and they only tour on weekends and they basically just tour every weekend. And that's a really easy way to tour without having to necessarily take several weeks off work. So a really easy way to start dipping your toes out of your hometown without investing or having to quit your job. Physical limitations, immunocompromised, disabled, injured bandmates all have limitations on how many shows they can play in a row, how long they can sit in a van, food in the green room. These all are not deal breakers. They really aren't. I know a lot of bands who require masking in the van and at the merch table so that they don't get their immunocompromised bandmates sick. That's like all the way at the professional level with like Deerhoof. It's super, super common. Same with disabled or injured bandmates. Most venues can accommodate for that. So you can easily look up which of those venues will be able to accommodate and take into account when you're booking your tour. It can be worked with. It's not a deal breaker. I just want to say that to anyone out there who feels like it's stopping them from getting out because I've seen it done. I've done it myself. And there's so many ways to work around it. So even like a last minute injury, I've seen a band just figure it out, with tracks or whatever. So just know that there's so many possibilities to accommodate band needs, and nothing is a deal breaker except not being able to leave the state, maybe. I know a lawyer if you need one. Stamina. Again, talking about band needs. How many hours can your band safely and sanely spend driving in a van? Okay, it sounds really romantic, but it gets really fucking nuts after a while. So think about how long can you guys actually spend with each other in a van and be safe. Same with driving after a show. Sometimes you need to get ahead on a drive the next day. Can you safely drive 45 to an hour after a show, get out of the city, maybe get a cheaper hotel, get in the direction of the drive you need to go the next day and save yourself an hour the next day or be able to sleep in a little longer? Who's not drinking? Who's not doing drugs? Who's going to be sober enough to do that? Like safety is really important. You can strategize with your band. Myself, I don't drink, so I'm the night driver. I get the band from the venue to the hotel or the venue to the next city if we need to drive an hour or two. And I feel like that's how I contribute. I don't like to drive during the day because I have to work on my computer. So I feel, I'm accommodating my band's needs and they're accommodating mine, and everyone kind of wins. They can go party and they'll have a safe way to get home. Data is really important as well. This is all the shit that the talent buyers and booking agents and all the fancy people, corporate people want to see because they love their numbers. They love numbers. They usually don't go to shows that much. They don't understand what it is, what a scene is sometimes because they're stuck behind their computers. So, unfortunately, numbers are really important. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm like not a numbers person. I'm very free flowing kind of gal. So, this is not a natural thing for me, and this is definitely something that I had to fight against and figure out. But this is things that you should be collecting for yourself and for talent buyers. Streaming data, that's super easy. If you don't have Spotify for artists, Apple Music for artists, Tidal for artists, you can easily access all this data, see where you are loved the most in which city, which state, which country even. That can help gauge where you should be getting out to. Again, you need to know where your fans are, right? Socials data. Instagram has some insights. They're not that accurate, so I wouldn't hold yourself to them, but they can help understand your age base. If you have a lot of fans that are 18 to 21, you might want to consider doing all ages shows or looking for all ages venues. So the age group, the geolocation of all of these fans on social media, also really important. Direct outreach. A lot of people are active on social media. They like to communicate directly with their fans. And honestly, that's one of the best ways to build that fan base is to directly be interacting with fans. So sometimes polling, hey, where do you want me to go, can help you see where your fans want you. And if there's multiple people with the same answer, then you should definitely get out there ASAP, right? Create an email list. It's kind of old school, but they still work. Make it unique, make it yourself, just like your website. We went over that kind of in the first and second workshops, but make it feel like you and it'll stand out. Playlists and Bandcamp, we're gonna show a little bit what that's, but sometimes they're really good at algorithmically linking fan bases. So you say, oh, fans of my music also like this band, and we're in a bunch of playlists together and they're in two towns over. So we could totally like put a show together, right? How strong would that be versus being like, oh, I guess we'll go three towns over and see who's there. It can really help decide. So all this data, keep a list for yourself, keep a table, an Excel, whatever you like to use. But also I'll show you what someone has done to put this information in a really beautiful one sheet, digestible way for a talent buyer. How do I know where to play? So finding venues, this is how I like to do it. This is a very DIY way of doing it when you don't have a whole contact sheet of venues, that you've collected over the years. This definitely start one. I'm gonna reiterate lists, make lists of everything. But this is definitely the most daunting element of DIY touring, right? There's so many venues and I have no idea where to play. So I'm going to go over when you're just getting out and doing an establishing run. That means that you're getting to these cities for the first time. You're establishing yourself in these cities. You might not make a lot of money. It can be an investment. But in the future, now you have some data from that city. So you can leverage that a lot more. So these establishing runs are really important. And we're going to be talking about doing an establishing run. This is very DIY. You're going to be dealing mostly with door deals. Remember, we talked about how it's just like a percentage of the door, and you just have to sell the tickets and figure it out, right? So we're gonna be talking from that perspective primarily. So if it's your first time in a new city, you want to look for a small venue, right? That's why secondary markets are awesome because they have a lot of DIY, all ages venues. Primary markets do as well. Sometimes they're just more competitive. And you have to ask yourself, when I look up the sellable capacity, like how many people they can sell tickets to, can I bring a third to half of that in that city? Do I feel like confident that I can bring 20 to 30 people in another city? And that's when you feel that you should confidently take that step towards touring. Before then, it might be a financial investment, which is totally fine. It's just that's how to play it safe. You can totally pump money into it and get out there early. Everyone's in a different position, so it's just whatever works for you. How do you find those venues? Besides Googling, which doesn't always work, you can use social media. This is what I love to do. I love to stalk other bands' flyers, and then I'll see where they're playing, where they've played before, and maybe if it's the same place. A lot I'll look at bands they've played with and where they've played. And that's all. You can do like an Instagram Wikipedia dive, essentially, Instagram dive, and just get really deep into looking at bands' flyers and who they've played with and make note of everything. And then you have three or four different options that you could reach out to. Some might vary in size, some might vary in deal, but you want options because you want options, right? When you go to a booking tab on a venue's website, they'll typically have an email, but sometimes they'll have a booking form, right? It just says like a really generic, what date do you want? What's your band? Have you played here before? The venue will note their policy on touring bands. Typically, they'll either focus primarily on touring bands and not so much on local bands, or they'll focus more on local bands and kind of make touring bands like a once in a while thing. So make sure you're keeping an eye for their policy or their like ethos on touring versus local bands. And if you think it's a good shot, try the booking form. It's really not a guarantee. Most venues I feel like don't really look at that stuff, to be perfectly honest. But just in case they do, it looks really good to try through multiple angles. Again, sometimes their Instagram lists an email for booking. Their website typically will as well. Get that too and send an email. And we went over how to send an email in depth in the first workshop, but today we'll just briefly go over what it's like to pitch for a tour. Reddit and Discord, I forgot to add, have threads for scenes in each city. So sometimes you'll have musicians honestly reviewing the venues too, and that's kind of the best. They'll be like, this is a really cool spot, but the sound is shit. And if that matters to you, then you probably shouldn't play there. Finding local bands, it's basically the same thing. You're deep diving on social media, you're finding playlists, geographically or algorithmically connected bands, fans that like this band also like this. Bandcamp is a super amazing resource because you truly can search by city and genre. And sometimes it's not really up to date, but usually they'll have quite a bit of like tags on there. So it's a great way to find similar sounding bands in each city. And it gets really specific, as you can imagine. Our Google Sheet, too. We made a little Google Sheet here. Someone in chat really graciously made that. So we're collecting bands, where you're from, and links. Check that out, too, because I'm sure there's people in the same city as you or in a neighboring city who you didn't even know about. And through this workshop, you found them. And again, making your own list. Make your own list. I have a whole like Google Sheet with tabs by state and then categories by city and what the band name is, what they sound, a link, and maybe a contact. And I have been building that for the past 6 years or something. So I have a collection of bands from all over the country now that I like or that I feel like my roster works with, and that saves so much time. Oh shit. Okay, we're gonna try it. I don't know how to exit my, okay, here you go. Can everyone see this? Cool. So we're gonna do an example of live routing. I mean, routing, but live. I'm gonna show you how I like to route my tours. And this will be from Los Angeles to Bellingham, Washington, and back. And we're just going to quickly kind of go over how I do this. This is by no means the way that everyone does this. This is by no means the way you should do this. This is just how I like to do it and how it's worked for me for a while. I did this in Anniversary too. And this sheet with these amount of information on it is actually a really great thing that you can also share with your band so that they stop fucking asking you questions. They can just look at the syllabus. When's the next show? Just look at the syllabus. Sorry. Sometimes you have to do everything and like a mom. So we're starting the tour today, technically. I'm going to share this template along with all the other resources. Naraya and Zach, they're in that Google Drive. So hopefully we'll be able to spread that around as well, along with the recordings whenever we're ready. Or maybe this will be earlier because the recordings might take a bit. But this I'm going to share with you so you can also fill it out yourself. I formatted the A column to work as a date. So you just pull that down and it automatically populates for you. So I mentioned starting with primary markets helps because it gives me an idea. Like I know for my band, these are the places that I know a lot of folks are interested in my music. There are also smaller towns that people are interested in my music, but if I'm gonna pick 5 cities, I'm gonna try to stick to the ones that I know I'm going to get, and they happen to be primary markets. We might need to add secondary markets, wink, wink. But right now I'm going to start with listing my primary markets. So I'm going to start in LA, or I can end in LA. I'm going to do Long Beach. I know that I could, that's a secondary market. I know that I could get folks out there. Technically, it's sometimes within the radius of Los Angeles, technically, but you can treat them separately in most cases. Just check the radius restriction. If you remember from the previous workshops. I'm going to hit San Diego because I'm from there. Then I'm going to hit San Francisco. I'm going to hit Portland. I'm going to hit Seattle. I'm going to hit Bellingham. Another secondary market, Bellingham, that I know I could get a lot of folks out because for some reason we have a lot of fans up there. So those are the cities I want to hit, right? This is not thinking about drive time. This is not thinking about venue size, spans, anything. These are just the cities that I know I want to be because I've looked at my numbers, I've looked at my community, I've looked at my fan base, and this is what I have, right? So I'm going to start Los Angeles here. 0 hours to get there because I'm here. I'm going to target a Saturday because I'm at a place where I know I can bring 100, 150 people on a weekend. So I can, with certainty, if I'm going to put 100% of my marketing power to this show, this hometown show, that I can headline on a Saturday, right? Sometimes you might say, well, I don't want to do a Saturday because that sounds really hard. I'm actually going to start the tour on a Monday in Los Angeles, which if you can bring 50 people out, that Monday might be the best. I'm going to, for Saturday, San Diego is the sleepiest place ever. I grew up there, so I'm allowed to say that. I don't think I could get folks out there. They all work a lot. Everything's pretty spread out, so you have to travel pretty far to venues. I'm gonna do a Saturday because I know that's the only day of the week that people in San Diego go out. And now that we're down here, I'll just hit Long Beach on the way back up to LA. Right? So that's kind of my reasoning here for this routing. And I can still treat this Monday as like a tour kickoff, right? I could treat this because this is my hometown. So it doesn't matter if it's on the first day of the tour, or the last day of the tour, or somewhere in between. It still has an impact on the tour. So I'm going to do 0 hours here. It's about 1 hour to Long Beach, and it's about 2 hours to San Diego. Now that I've got SoCal handled, I could hit those 3 easy in a row. I know that my band can play 5 shows in a row before taking a break, so we're looking pretty good already. I know that financially, playing close to home means I could drive home after each one if I needed to, so that saves time on hotel, You don't need to rent a van because the bandmates can drive themselves. These are all things that you can manage in a weekend. So this would be an excellent weekender if you work during the week. We're looking at San Francisco next, right? Because that'll be the next thing up north. And that's pretty tough on a Tuesday, but I feel better. I would feel better about it on a Thursday, right? It's not quite the weekend in a primary market, but it is a Thursday. So people do go out on Thursdays, especially for music. And it's a pretty good time to have a Thursday. So maybe rather than trying to get up there as fast as possible, I'll spend some days at home, take that Tuesday and Wednesday off. We don't have to pay for hotels. We don't have to pay for anything. We're just essentially taking a couple days off. I could even drive up a day early and do some press stuff in San Francisco. Spend some time there, get to know the community, stay with a friend for free, and that allows you to use that Tuesday and Wednesday to your advantage, right? Now we're looking at Friday. Oh gosh. I don't think we can get from San Francisco to Portland in 6 hours, right? Because that's how much I want to drive maximum before getting to Portland. So I'm going to look at, I'm already in San Francisco on that day. It's a long drive. This is how I calculate. Boom. 9.5. And so let's say if we round up to 11 for a couple hours of driving, breaks, food, gas, 11 or 12, right? So unless you guys are, road warriors, then that's awesome. I'm 30 and I tour with old people and I don't think I can do that, but it's everyone has different needs, right? So that's quite a drive. Let's call it 11 hours, right? So here's where I'd have to decide. Do I take a drive day and I don't even fuck with a Friday? Or do I add a city? Well, I got hit up not too long ago by this guy in Sacramento, this band that's kind of big over there. They like my stuff. So maybe they'd want to make a show together. And that cuts that drive a little bit. So let's look at Sacramento. That's only 3 hours away from San Francisco, but it takes from that 11-hour drive, right? And you can add a city with people that you like and that they want you out there. So now we're going to look at Sacramento to Portland Drive, and we're looking at 9 hours still. Well, shit. Looks like we're going to have to take a day off. And that's okay because we don't really want to be playing Portland on a Saturday. That's quite a bit of competition if you think about it. There's so many bands in Portland and so many venues that trying to do a Saturday, unless you have a really strong headliner there that brings a ton of people and could put all that marketing power into their hometown show, that's going to be hard. So let's take Saturday for a drive day. And that's going to be 10 hours, let's say 9 hours of driving so that we can get into Portland that night. And that sucks, but you can also split them into 2 days if you don't want to be driving for 9 hours and just don't even mess with the weekend, right? So we're here. Seattle on a Monday, not bad. It can be hard because it's cold and people are sleepy. But if you are somewhere that's a small capacity, it's doable on a Monday. Tuesday, I feel like you might have a little more luck. As we're getting closer to Wednesday and Thursday, you're going to have a lot more luck here. So what do we need to do? Do we need to add time? Do we need to add dates? Well, I know that my little sister goes to college in Eugene. So maybe I should add Eugene. And my little sister can tell all her friends to come out. So we're adding Eugene here on the way up to Portland, which means, I don't know, maybe 7 hours driving. And then let me double check. It's been a bit. Yeah. So now we've split it up. So we're in Portland on Monday and we're in Seattle on Tuesday. Not bad. 0 hours, 2 hours. Are you guys understanding how I'm doing this routing with the hours? If you see anything that's over 6 hours, you might want to consider a drive day. I like to. if you can afford it. Seattle is 3 hours from Portland, just about. So you're playing Seattle on a Tuesday. Not bad. Now, Bellingham's a bit of a sleepy town too. And I know I have a lot of fans there, and I want to make sure I can get the most of them out there. I know some of them might have families or work, so maybe a Thursday I might have better luck. Let's look at Bellingham on a Thursday. I don't remember the drive time from Seattle. Okay, easy. So we're looking at 2 hours from Seattle, right? What can we do on that Wednesday? Press. Do you have a place to stay in Seattle for free? Why don't you stay an extra day? Get to know it. Go tour KEXP. Go meet some DJs that have supported you. Go see your favorite band play. Let's do a day off. You're already playing 3 days in a row. Plus you've got drive day, 2 shows, and a drive day. That's pretty miserable. Those are not off days, remember? So you got 7 days in a row without a break. Take a day off. Think about how insane you can go and play it on the safe side because being on the tour is really exhausting. Really exhausting. Some folks, when they're out of the ritual, their whole life falls apart. So think about what your band needs, what you need, how many days off. If you need more, schedule them in there. It's really important. And you can figure out the financial stuff after. All right, look at that. Woo, that's a tour right there, right? But there's just a little problem now. We need to get home somehow. So what do? We kind of used up our major markets on the way up. So I think it's time to do a little bit of research. Friday, we might need to take a drive day. Saturday, let's check out a different city, If we can get from Bellingham to Arcata, how long is that? 11 hours. That sucks. But you could also you could do 8 hours one day, and then you drive 5 hours to finish off the day of the show, right? So it's not terrible. So say that you're driving 5 hours to Arcata the next day before the show. That's totally doable, right? Okay, we're getting closer. We're back in California. So that's a big step. There's a lot of DIY stuff in Arcata. It's a tertiary market, but there's so much college stuff going on there that the DIY scene is booming, and I know that I could get folks out on a Saturday. Easy. Sunday, I might need to look at something in the middle of the coast, right? So Arcata to, let's say, Santa Barbara. Let's see how far that is. I don't know. That's way too far. 10 hours. I know. Let's do, oh gosh, let's Central Coast. Slow. 8 hours. That's pretty rough. So it's kind of far up there. What I've done before is I hit Sacramento again, but not with the show. I do a live session, a music video shoot. I stay with a friend there just on the way down. No problem. And then let's say I do Sacramento. Gosh, I can't type right now. That's like a 6 hours drive. That's not bad. I do a live session here because I can't play Sacramento again that soon, right? But I don't have a place to stay, so why not? And then, you know, I could just send it and get home. I could add Santa Barbara if I have some friends there in a college on a Monday, might not do too great. So I think I'm just gonna drive home. That's 12-hour day. Not actually, but let's see. With all the stops and whatnot. 6 hour. It's half that time. Okay, so not bad, right? Here we have a pretty safe route. We have days off. We have days where we kind of have to eat a drive day, but that's kind of the nature of touring on the West Coast. Everything's so far apart. And unfortunately, the span between Northern California and Portland is pretty hard to get folks to come out there. And the amount of venues that are available for smaller size is also limited. So it just takes a little bit of research, right? And that's what we're going to do right now. I know venues in these 3 cities, right? I'm just going to write some down that I want to hit up. that I've seen other bands play at, for example. And these are all things that I feel like I could, they're right now they're 150 to 250 capacity, which I feel like comfortable in handling myself, regardless of the lineup, right? The local lineup. These are not my favorites by any means, but they're just things that I'm thinking of. So I've never been to San Francisco before, let's say. How do I find that venue? Well, again, you're going to be Googling, you're going to be looking at Instagram. You're going to find that DIY spot that bands are playing at through flyers, right? You're going to look at all the flyers, do that deep dive, and you're going to find this one DIY spot, Beauty Supply. It's actually in Oakland, if we want to be specific. So you found the DIY spot, you got the date, great. You can confirm that one. That's when you've reached out, you've done the pitch email, you've heard back, they've confirmed the date with you. Now it's time to move on to the lineup, right? I'm going to delete this from the lineup tab now that we have that. Sacramento. Again, I'm going to look up where my favorite bands have played. A lot of bands that have already toured before. What size are these rooms? We're going to look up the capacity. Capacity? Yeah, exactly. Drive day. Then I'm going to look up college, DIY, small bands. Where have they played? Look up, we're going to do this for everyone, and we're going to look up 3, 4, 5 different options for each city. So we have a lot to work with. And you want to make sure when you're researching these venues, do they book bands similar to yours? Are you trying to book your rock band at a techno bar? They probably won't just be like, no, they'll be like, who the fuck is this person? Has no idea who they're reaching out to. You want to look good. You want to look like you've done your research. So do your research. Make sure that the promoters they work with, they work with promoters, they're reputable. Make sure that the size of the room works for you too. And if you have any kind of data for that city when you're pitching it over, my sister goes to college in Eugene. That's useful information when you're saying, hey, I've never played here before, but I could get 20 college kids out to this show easy, right? So things to think about, is it close to the college? Is it an hour away from the college? Are you going to be able to get a bunch of college kids out to that? Probably not. So we're going to do that for every city. You're going to look at every venue, right? Same with bands. You're going to go on Bandcamp. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. This is my favorite thing to do, actually. I just dive into this without even having to book a tour, and I add them to my list. It's how when you go diving in Spotify playlists or like title things, and you're like, I'm gonna get all the new weird artists that haven't been discovered yet. This is how it feels. It's like sifting for gold. So you would say, I want to find a band in Eugene that's a rock band. Bandcamp Discover, sorry. Bandcamp / Discover is the actual website that you want. So you're going to look up Eugene, Oregon, and you're going to look up rock. Now, this is where you should get a little more specific, because rock is also rockabilly and rock steady. So I'm going to look for rock alternative. Well, that didn't work. Let's look at rock. General rock. So we're seeing, okay, I have kind of a psychedelic band, and this is listed as alternative, and this artwork looks pretty psychedelic, so maybe I should check that out. Then I'll look at Blotter Boys. I'll see they're from Eugene, Oregon. I say there's a genre defying, that's cool. Maybe I'll listen to a couple songs. And then typically they'll also list their website or their socials, but not this time. That's okay. I'll look them up on Instagram. Oops. Cool. So I see they got 646 followers, but they're opening for a lot of shows. So they could be a really cool opener with Blotter Boys, their psychedelic stuff. I feel like this could be fun. So I'll hit them up to open, right? And I would just list here Blotter Boys. Question mark? If I'm reaching out to them already, so if I have a list of other bands, right? I'll italicize the ones that I'm reaching out to, and then once I get an answer, they either get crossed out because they're not available, or they get bolded because they are available, and that's a lead. And then once they do get confirmed, then I'm going to add them here. Boom. So that's what I would do for the lineup for everything. This kind of itinerary is really cool because you can also input the deal here. So you can be really, you know very clearly what you're going to get paid or what your deal terms are. We went over that last week a little bit, and we'll go over this in a sec too. But having this right next to the lineup allows you to see, also kind of gauge how much money you're going to make, right? So if you get 80% of the door here and 100% of the door here, and then 50% after 300, which is a terrible deal, by the way, here, oops, then okay, we can make a nice, at least maybe 200 bucks in each place, right? Then once you're done, you input how much you made in that same place so that, or you can make another column if you want to keep the deal so you can keep track of what those deals are. Also very important. Sometimes venues change their deals up, or sometimes you can be like, hey, you gave me a better deal last time. Could we do that again? Totally fair to negotiate that before confirming the show. So you're going to do that for all of these. I'm going to talk about how important it is to work with promoters in a little bit, but you're going to add the promoters here and the contacts here so that you also, if the band needs to contact the person that's organizing the show, they can look at the itinerary and easily find that email or phone number or whatever they have. Some notes, adding the link here and made it so that it doesn't overflow on your cell looks really nice. You don't need that much. You just need to be able to copy and paste it easily. Housing is also really important. Home drive day here. I'm going to stay with a friend with Mark, whatever. It's not my friend, but you would make a note of that just to make sure that you have housing settled as well. I don't know anybody in Arcata, so I'm going to need to do a hotel there. And that's about 150, 120. I mean, you can go really cheap, but if you want 4 people to sleep in a relatively clean place, it'll be like 110 to 130, 150. So let's call it 130 actually. And that's just something to think about. It's an expense that you're gonna have to deal with. If you can't find a place to stay, that's totally fine. But definitely do that over staying with a random fan. I will tell you that right now. Cool. So I will share this template for you so you can fill it out yourself. Again, this would be crazy. You're going to be looking 6 months down the line for the best dates and the best options, at least. I know that a lot of venues are booking like November right now, so it's getting pretty competitive. And the more time you have to prepare, the more likely you're going to be able to get those cities on the dates that you want. Typically, if you're coming, to get a Friday, or let's say to get a Saturday in San Diego, you're going to need to reach out far in advance because those will be gone real soon. Those are the first things to go, right? So think about how far in advance you're going to need to start reaching out for those weekend dates and maybe go off those, right? Do those first just to secure them. All right, back to the slideshow. Yay. So again, 6 to 8 months in advance, up to 12 is great. Honestly, the more the better. If you're thinking about releasing something down the line in a year, in half a year or in a year, great time to start thinking about the tour as well and reaching out. We talked about subject lines. I'm going to show you what a tour subject line looks like so that you can keep track of the emails that you send out. You're able to search the city, the venue, and the date so that you can easily look up that information in your email. You're also doing it so that they can look up, it's this band wanting this date. Easy. An EPK band website is super important. It's, again, those numbers, that data that they want, that they really need and yearn for, and the only thing they understand music as. Give it to them. Give them as much as possible. Working with promoters is really important, and this is why it can help benefit you. I mean, first off, a lot of the burden of the marketing goes to the promoter, right? They are totally tapped into their community. They understand how to get folks out on what day of the week and how in that city. So they'll have the best understanding of what it takes to get those tickets sold. They'll also have great recommendations for local bands they've worked with before, bands they know have a certain draw that could benefit the concert. So they'll have recommendations for that. Sometimes way better to work with their curation. Sometimes they're really specific about curating lineups. So think about whether or not you want to offer everything up front or work with them. It depends on the promoter again. Promoters are also, again, they're independent booking agents, right? They're not in-house talent buyers like people who work at venues. So they work with a bunch of venues in town. And that can allow you to have an overflow date or a second date somewhere else. So say I'm really going to undersell and I'm going to do an intimate set at a bar that fits like 50 people, right? My ambient music or whatever. And I'm going to work with a promoter to get those 50 people out, but I'm going to work with them also to reserve the next day. Say we have those 2 days in Seattle, and I want to play, instead of competing on a weekend there or on a Monday, I want to play with really small rooms, really kick-ass bands, and get as much selling out energy as possible. So I'll work with a promoter who can hold 2 dates for me at the same venue. And if the first one sells out, they can secure the hold for that second date and get me a second date at that venue. So I can play 2 shows, or it could be 2 shows in one day. Venues have different options for that, but promoters will have all that information and knowledge and their resources at hand so they can work with you and what you need, right? So you can play it safe and start with a really small venue, and if anything, work with a promoter that can overflow to a second date or a bigger venue. Again, as much information up front as possible. Line up ideas, relevant data. Like I said, my little sister goes to college in Eugene. That matters, right? That explains that they could get 20 people out, just that. Okay, this is an example of my homie Joanne, who I've been using in the past 2 workshops as my DIY tour booker, who is booking a tour for her band. This is my band. And this will be kind of a conversation between Joanne reaching out to venues and the venues replying. And this is kind of how a typical interaction you'll see. So notice at the top, the subject, this is my band at venue date. This allows me and the venue to be able to easily look up, okay, this band reached out for this date. I can just look it up in my Gmail. I don't have to scroll through the hundreds of emails that I get, right? Hope you're well. I'm reaching out to see if you'd be interested in hosting. This is my band from City during our West Coast tour, targeting date or date window. So if you, for example, have a major market locked in already and you're looking to add some cities around there, you can also give them a range of dates. And once you get that range of dates back, you can then go back to your Google Sheet and kind of play puzzle with the different, the different dates that they've offered you, right? And see if it works for you, if you can make it work with driving, if it makes sense. Also book a local headliner and local opener, the local sandwich, which is the best way to get folks out to out of town shows, period. Even if you're an established musician, local sandwich is always going to be the best because you've got the slot in the middle where you've got the openers crowd and the headliners crowd both there for your set, right? Hyperlinked examples of other bands. Sometimes you don't need to hyperlink. Most venues will be familiar with local bands that are playing around, so you probably don't need to link it, but just do it anyway for old time's sake. Note, I forgot to put in this email, or Joanne did, sorry, whether your relevance in the city, right? You're going to talk about maybe they'll come back and be like, hey, have you ever played here before? And you can say no, but my sister goes to college here. And we can bring 30 people out. Whatever. So also important to note that, and also important to note if you're open to being added to an existing bill. So if you can only have that date, like you've got the 2 cities around it locked in and you need this date filled, and you say, I don't have any flexibility on the date, you might consider being open to be adding to an existing bill. It's not amazing because it adds more work for the venue and less for you. And that's typically how they want it the other way around. But also can be a bit of a roulette with lineup. I've played some really weird shows getting added last minute to a bill. Did that benefit me? Probably not, because I didn't make that much money and I didn't really find a new fan base. So think about that too. So this is the venue replying. Hi, Joanne. Thanks for reaching out. This sounds like a show that would do well. Unfortunately, we don't have your requested date, right? Sometimes I'll just be like, NA, not available. And that's the only reply you get. So this is like a more human talent buyer that we're interacting here. Joanne is interacting with. And they're offering upfront. Typically, you'll have to be like, okay, thank you, no worries. Do you have this date then? And keep doing this bullshit back and forth because they don't want to send you their list of other available dates unless they know you and they want to do you a favor because it really is time consuming to be like, we also have these dates and you would be this hold on these dates. So some venues will provide that up front. You might have to dig for it. That's fine. So this talent buyer is a human being, took the time to offer another date. Amazing. So this is how Joanne would reply depending on her answer. Thank you for your interest. And remember, the talent buyer said, sounds like a show that would do well. So acknowledge that they complimented you and that they said something nice because that you're a human too, right? Thanks for your interest. We can do this date. So you're underlining that date so that when they're looking at the email, they say, date, cool. That's all they need to read, right? Place a hold or move towards confirming the date. Some venues will do like a hold thing first, and then you need to confirm the lineup, and then you come back and say, I want to challenge the hold. I want this date. They'll reach out to all the other holds in front of you. If they're not ready to move, they'll give it to you. But it goes in order of the holds, right? We went over this during the first one. If anybody has any questions, we can go over it in the end. But you can place a hold or you can confirm it. So some of them will be like, we have this date fully available and you can have it because this sounds fun. So what else would you need from you to secure it? That shows that you're ready to provide anything they need to make sure that you can get this date, right? It shows that you're dedicated. It shows that you are ready to hop on it. You'll send them anything they need and that you want that date really bad. You want to be the first one to want that date and to hop on it. So here they're saying, oh, shoot, well, we only had that one date that we could do because we have the two other cities locked in. So we don't have any wiggle room. Would you have any recommendations for similar sized rooms? You might not get that response. Honestly, that's also super time consuming for a talent buyer or promoter to think about, okay, 100 capacity rooms that also book rock bands in town. That's 5 minutes of their time that they probably don't, they're not going to make money off this show. So they're not going to take the time to reply. Sometimes they will, and that's great, but definitely worth an ask. This is an example of a band, a one sheet that I got from a band that I was really impressed with because it was easy to understand. It had all this data that I wanted. They haven't toured a whole lot, but they have a lot of exciting stuff going on. So this is a great way. Up here they had their band logo, right? And then album, teasing an album, right? This is just to help book the release tour that will go along with the album release. They have a nice quote up there, some press stuff, a nice quote that describes their sound or who they are, if they're local legends, stuff like that. Live, they've got how many tickets they've sold to date in their hometown, their latest like big show that they did, opening shows that they've done, 20 plus cities. So they have toured a little bit. They have headline performances at smaller venues, but they've played really big venues and they even did a recent headline show at a huge venue in San Francisco. So this is all really important stuff. Who they've opened for, how many tickets can they bring? This is really important for the live. Streaming, this person just put all of it into one area, which is great because I don't have to look it up. You could also put, if you're in editorial playlist here is really helpful. Festivals also really important, noting if you've played out of the city, how much, draw do you have at a festival? Have you ever headlined a festival? And this person also has curated festivals, so I know that they're an organizer. And myself as an organizer, I'm very interested in that, in helping fellow organizers. So that's already a plus one for me. Some more press stuff here, write-ups, TV interviews. They're definitely active on social media and as well as radio stuff. And down here, they had a photo of the whole band, but of course, I'll give them some privacy. But this is a great example of a one sheet, which is a one PDF sheet. Easy, really easy to understand, broken down data. And you basically want to have all this in here. Also valuable if relevant. Social media numbers. Sometimes I like to see that as well. If you have a lot of Instagram followers, for example, or TikTok or whatever people do these days, like you could definitely add that in there if it's relevant. If you only have 2,000, don't add that in there. Okay, and of course, kind of what I went over last week, but don't forget to get that confirmation. You want to see holds cleared or confirmed, and that will tell you that the show is happening for sure. Some venues, especially in the DIY or small town scene, they won't send you an offer sheet because it's a little bit of a corporate thing. I think it's totally fine to ask for one, honestly, because you need to protect yourself. And like I've said many times, we've been kind of brainwashed into thinking We shouldn't do that as musicians, but it's totally okay to ask for an offer sheet. And if you think that it will kind of alienate that bar or that promoter or whatever, then there's something that you can ask them for the terms that can be answered in an email. And in California, that does count as a contract. So as long as it's all in one place, it counts. And this is what you would ask for. You can take a screenshot of this, okay? Deal terms. You want all this information. This will help you fill out your Excel sheet. This will help you calculate how much money you're going to make, kind of what the offer sheets would list, basically. So it's like an easy email way to do an offer sheet without having the venue's burden of drawing up a whole sheet and contract and stuff like that. So this does count as an agreement, but you're bringing the most of the work to the table in that sense, right? So this includes the financial offer, the lineup. So where in the lineup you're listed is super important because if you're listed as direct support, you need that to be respected, right? You don't want us all of a sudden be the opener and then no one shows up to your set. So make sure that's on the offer sheet as well. Your direct support, your local sandwich, whatever you want to put here, your headliner, co-headliner. Set length, that is also part of the contract. You get paid that amount for that set length. That's what the talent buyer is buying, right? That's the service you're providing for that amount of money. So make sure that's very clear between you how long your set length is and that you're not violating that, either playing too long or too short. Both of those violate the contract and they can jeopardize your pay. So make sure that you're respecting that. Backline is also really important when you're touring. Try your best to just borrow as much backline as possible. That means just bringing breakables on your drums, maybe just the bass amp head instead of the cab as well. It saves a lot of room in the van. You can rent a smaller car, and those things are available, but you need to make sure that they're part of the contract as well, so that's not a surprise, right? Accommodations, most places will not provide. Some do. Some have a little bed you can crash in the venue, whoever's playing there that night. So always worth asking. Sometimes they have discounts for nearby hotels, hostels, etc. In Europe, you run into this a lot more because they do house you a lot of the time. So yeah, definitely always worth asking. Same with age is allowed. This will help you gauge how much tickets you're going to sell, who to market towards. Comps are part of the offer sheet as well. They're how many guest list passes you get. That is part of the contract, so please don't violate that. If you have a maximum amount of 5 comps, that's as much as you get. Announce an on-sale date that helps you with your marketing. Ticket price helps you calculate that walkout potential, which we went over last week. Same with capacity. Merch. A lot of venues in the country take merch cuts. So this is really important that you make sure you get their final word on, do you get 100% of the merch? Does the artist sell the merch? Or does the venue sell? Is there a cut of the merch? Set times and sound check schedule, you might not always get that. You might need to reach out closer to the date for advancing whoever their production or sound people are. But it's always worth asking off the top if they have it. If they have a typical run of show with 2 bands, the doors will at 7, first band's out at 8, and that's how it always is. So they'll have that there. Okay, we kind of went over this last week, so I'm just going to briefly go over this. And again, I'm not by any means a financial expert. I'm actually quite bad at finances. This is the worst part of booking that I have figured out over, like the thing that's taken me the longest to figure out. And it's only through talking with people that actually know what they're doing that I've learned these tips. So again, contracting, even as a musician that's for paid to, like, when you're hired to play a show for someone, last time and in these resources, there is a contract that you can have your employer fill out, which is the band leader or the label, whoever's paying you. And that will guarantee a lot of things for you, protect you. Please don't be afraid to do this. It's so important. I did not do this for a tour that I did in November, and I still haven't gotten paid. So I regret not doing that really bad. But that's just how important it is. This will detail in how many days you have to get paid, how much money you're owed per show, blah, blah, blah. So this will put it in one place, really easy to understand. And you can just be like, hey, remember how this is, our agreement? Can you pay me now? Rainy day. Kind of talked about this last week as well, but it's really important to have about $500 saved up for maybe 3 days of bad shit. So say that one of your bandmates gets COVID or you have a flat tire, your car breaks down, and you have to miss a couple days of show. You don't get paid for shows you don't play. So you will lose that money that day on merch sales that you could have done, van rental, gas, food. Sometimes you're paying your artist per diem, not just for shows. So you're gonna lose money if there's an emergency. And it's, in my opinion, really smart to have a couple of those days saved up money-wise before you go on a tour, so that if something happens and you have to cancel 2 or 3 shows, you have the funds. You're not going to be like choking and, maxing out your credit cards. Like you have something to get you through that shitty time. I've done that and not done that, and I've really regretted when I haven't done that, and we lost thousands of dollars on a tour when we got COVID. And I've really appreciated when I have done that. And we treated it like a vacation and got an Airbnb and ate healthy food and did, made the best of the situation. So if you can save that up, save it up. If you need to raise money before a tour, making merch or doing a GoFundMe, these are all really easy ways to save up that rainy day. But yeah, get 1,000 to 1,500, maybe even $2,000 saved up, because if like worse comes to worse, you could pay for the whole tour up front. It's not necessary again, but it relieves a lot of stress financially if you can save that up. Route around releases, I mentioned that again. Talent buyers are looking for those statistics, they're looking for numbers. So boost those numbers before you're getting on the road. Release music, get some press going, get your engagement online up, whether that's following trends on social media or communicating directly with your bands and incentivizing band communication. Those are all really useful things. And again, you're looking 6 to 8, more like 12 months in advance if you can, for the best dates, right? And if you're international, have your tax documents printed per venue so that all you have to do is hand it to them. They will have zero excuse to not pay you on time, right? And you can also have your label or your United States booking representative fill out a federal tax exempt form so that you don't have to pay that 30% federal tax withholding. You're not going to pay it, it gets withheld. So the venue doesn't withhold that 30% federal tax because you are international, right? So that's only if you're getting paid over $1,500. Have a separate bank account for your band. This makes expense report, and also taxes and keeping track of how much you're profiting versus losing on a tour way easier. So do that first, like today. Most bank accounts won't even charge you. Most banks won't even charge you to make a new account. You can get a debit and credit card for it that's specifically just for that band. Pump $1,000 into it and have that in there for the rainy day, or to buy that merch up front for the tour. There's a lot of expenses up front. Vehicle rental typically is up front as well. So think about not having that go through your personal account, because that will make tax season a nightmare. And there's so much you can write off. So just think about that. Booking days off, again, really want to stress how important it is for physical and mental health reasons. Each band has different needs. But don't think that you can do 8 shows in a row and not have a day off and not feel it. I'm on the 4 to 5 shows in a row before I would really love a day off for stamina's sake. I could do 6, but I'm going to be crying by the end of it. Festival anchors. This is a great way to secure some money. So festivals sometimes pay some good cash, a guarantee. You can even ask for a deposit of the upfront to help pay for the travel. But these anchors are really great ways to be like, okay, I need to get to this city by this date, right? So I'll route a tour there and back. And you know that you have at least that much money coming in at the very least. So you can work with that knowledge where you want to book, what dates of the week you want to book there, and what size venues you want to be booking at. Merch, stress again. Merch that's specific to tours sells really well. Don't make too much though, because having tour specific merch that doesn't sell, that you're trying to sell 2 tours later, is really awkward and not that fun. So make a super limited run of merch. That will do way better than not. And then have physical like releases of your music, whether that's a tape or a CD that you burn, anything at all that gets them to buy something cheap, that's accessible, that's a souvenir, and can also listen to your music or support the band in a way. So have as many merch items as possible, make exclusive runs for tours, and keep really good track of your inventory. Don't give away merch all the time, because most of the times when you're going on tour or you're supporting a bigger act and you're only getting paid like $200 a night, merch will be your primary source of income on tour. And you want to make sure you're playing in places that don't take big cuts, if any, because again, it is your primary source of income. And you can create bundle deals, you know, collect emails for a email list or a giveaway. And that also is a way to collect data. So it's super helpful. And you should have people dedicated to the merch the whole show, someone there the whole night. Because if it's empty, someone might not want to come up and buy anything. They want to talk to the band more than anything. So make sure the band is there, especially after the set. You go straight to the merch table and sell as much as possible and then have as many like point of sales as possible. So you want a card reader, you want Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, you want, especially if you're playing internationally, you don't have the same cash apps as that country does. For example, like a US going into Canada and vice versa, they don't have Venmo, they don't have PayPal, or they do have PayPal, but there's like huge fees. So think about how that affects your merch sales as well and how much you need to price them up if there are cuts. If the venue takes a cut, you're gonna have to price it up and explain to the artists, to the consumers that the reason why it's more expensive is because the venue takes a cut. And hopefully by the time we're touring bigger spaces, there's gonna be more awareness from the audience end about merch cuts and how much it sucks. But for now, we do our little part by being passive aggressive and we don't take our cut from our end. That's not fair. So you need to make your margin. That is a primary source of income. If a venue is taking a cut from your merch, do not lower your prices. You need to raise your prices so that you're still making the same money. And you can, you're gonna have to talk to the consumers about it. But that's why having the whole band there is helpful because it's not guilting them, but it's like you puppy dog eye them, you make them feel good, and then they will buy that $30 t-shirt, whatever, $5 more, they'll do it for a good interaction with the band, right? So being there is really important. Merch, I understand why people like merch sellers, and sometimes you have to do that if you get like pestered too much, but try to be the one selling the merch if you can. This is a brief thing. I went over this last time. Again, I'm not a financial expert, so please don't sue me. But these are before and after a 1,500 paycheck, things that you're going to be dealing with withholding taxes. Especially if you're international, you're going to have that stacked. Each state varies their what tax withholding. California is 7%. So if you were international, getting paid over 1,500 and playing in California, the total withholding would be 37%. That's stacking the federal and the state tax. So think about the state tax as well. It's very important. If you're getting paid over 1,500, that will affect your walkout, what you're going to walk out with, right? Local sandwich, I want to reiterate how important that is. It just takes a lot of the burden off you. If you've never been in a city before, get people that have a following there, that have a community there, tap into that scene, work with promoters, and it's better to oversell a small capacity room than it is to undersell a large capacity room. And that doesn't go just for tours, that goes for local shows as well. Because if you undersell a small capacity room, what does that tell not just the person in that venue, but every other talent buyer in town? Oh, well, they can't bring people out, right? So even one bad show of underselling can jeopardize your ability to book in other rooms. So think about how much better it looks to oversell a small room than it is to undersell a large room. In conclusion, booking a tour can be a bit of a puzzle, right? If you get back and they say, we don't have those dates, we only have this date, you say, okay, well, I can't really move these dates around, so I'll have to look at another venue. Or, okay, maybe this venue gave me 2 dates, maybe I could look at that other date, move that there, put this here. That's why we have the Google Sheet, because it's easy to move stuff around. But it is a bit of a puzzle, right? And that's kind of the most daunting part of booking a tour. I think it's the most fun part, personally, but, I'm a psycho. Homework is, we've spent the last 3 weeks here talking about everything from pitching yourself in your hometown, how to do it professionally, how to protect yourself, how to get paid, how to make sure you're getting paid properly on time, how to budget, and then how to route a tour, how to get out of your city, how to strategize when it's time to do that, what rooms to play, what bands to play with. These are all things that we went over the last 3 weeks that a lot of people feel like gatekeeping for some reason, but it's stuff that you figure out eventually, right? Through experience. And I would rather just cut that in half and just give it to you from my decade of fucking around and finding out. So I hope that you guys have benefited a little bit and can advocate for yourselves and feel comfortable reading offer sheets and encountering all this corporate jargon that we have to deal with in our art form. So your homework is just to go book yourself. Thank you guys so much. This has been really fun, and thank you again to UMAW and Rising Artists Foundation who have supported so much. I'm sure a lot of you have reached this workshop through them. So you're already doing the right thing by being a part of these organizations who will advocate for you and protect you and get us better conditions for our work.